Hey guys, Andy here from Mediocre Hobbies, coming at you with a very special old world video. As you guys know, I am frantically working through my Bretonnian collection for the old world, and I am loving every second of it. Now, I used to play Bretonnians back in 8th edition, and it was one of my favorite armies. I never really got it painted, so that's what I'm obviously going on this journey for now, going through my backlog of miniatures and getting them painted up. Now, obviously, some new/old miniatures have returned to Bretonnians with the release of them in the old world. One of the kind of most bizarre ones is the Bretonnian Bombard. This is basically a cannon in all retrospects. And when I first seen it in the entry in the Arcane Journal, I thought they had just added in a cannon. It only was a couple of weeks later until I realized that they used to actually have a Bretonnian Bombard miniature from many years ago. I talked about this on my podcast, and one of the listeners very kindly reached out to me and told me that he actually had a Bombard and he would be very happy to send it to me to build and paint in a video. I of course said yes. I tried frantically to try and offer him something for it, but he wasn't having any of it. I don't want to say his name just in case he doesn't want to be shared online, but if you are there and if you are watching, thank you so much for sending it to me. It was not only a Bretonnian Bombard, it was one of the first castings of the Bretonnian Bombard, still in its original packaging. From talking to this guy, it looks like he literally walked into a Games Workshop shop in 1988 and bought this miniature. It is even kind of predates the kind of second wave of Bretonnian Bombard, which came with 3 crew. This one has 5 crew. It came with 2 Bretonnian Laborer miniatures to go alongside it. I've never even seen one of these packagings before, but it does indeed say Games Workshop Limited 1988 on the back. So not only will I cherish the Bombard, I will cherish this container for the rest of my life. So it's pretty cool. In today's video, I'm going to try and get that thing built and painted and basically give it the reverence that it deserves and put it pride of place in my Bretonnian army. So I don't want to say anything else about the intro. I know it was long enough. I just want to give a little bit of background as to why I'm doing this particular piece. So sit down, strap in, and hopefully you enjoy this awesome video. And this is the Bretonnian cannon, or Bretonnian Bombard as it is now known, in its original packaging. And the cannon is in a little baggie and the crew are all in a little baggie. And as you can see, Games Workshop Limited 1988 stamped on the back. Like I said, I've never even seen one of these containers before, but obviously it's an official Games Workshop container. It is well before my time in the hobby. And I do wonder how many of these, even containers, still exist in the world in pristine condition like this one. To show my youth and ignorance of these things, I'm sure some old timers watching this video will be giggling or laughing at me, but it did actually take quite a long time for me to get inside of this case without breaking it. It does have a little knack to opening up, which I did not know how to do. So I had a little bit of a cut there, but there was a couple more minutes to be faffing about trying to get it open. After I got it out and removed the foam, it did reveal a whole host of pieces, including this little sprue of bases. And just to once again add to the age of this thing, the date that is stamped underneath these old school square bases, I promise it will come into focus at some stage, 1984. Those are some old bases, probably the oldest bases that I own or that I've ever seen or held, so that's kind of funky. And like I said, this is the bit where I got surprised when I was opening it. I was expecting the 3 crew members. As you can see there, the 3 on the top, and then the 2 on the bottom are these bizarre extra miniatures, which I had no idea who they were or why they existed. Every picture I could find of the Bombard had 3 crew. It did take a little bit of digging, and I did eventually find a few pictures which had 5 crew, and that led me down the rabbit hole, finding out that they're called laborers on their little tabs. Bretonnian laborers, so obviously they're there to, carry this thing into position or help move it around or grab ammunition and stuff like that. Whereas the 3 actual crew are there for aiming, loading, and firing of the cannons. So the important jobs are done with them. I decided to design a nice little scenic base for it. So this is where the Bombard sits on a 50 by 50 base, and then the 5 crew members all go on 25mm bases. So I decided to make a nice little stand so they would all sit in it together. I just wanted to use it. I wanted to make a nice little scene out of it. And I like it being removable. So obviously I could have just printed out a big base and glued them on, but I wanted it to be a nice scene, and I also wanted it to be removable so that if I played certain people in tournaments or something who are a little bit more picky about things, I would just use the Bombard itself and the 3 crew. Another reason that I wanted to have a nice scenic base on this thing is obviously the 35-year-old miniature, so it's not got an amazing amount of detail. It's another reason why I wanted to use the 2 extra crew in the thing, was that I wanted to just add as much extra detail as I possibly could. And I knew if that I gave it a nice scenic base, I could add my own flair and my own touch to the area that represents the miniature and hopefully make it look really cool. So I used some cork to get some sort of like mounds of earth and stuff. That looks a little bizarre now, but I promise you it'll blend in a lot better towards the end of the video. So I'm going to just read out the extract that comes in the arcane journal bit so you get a little bit of a better understanding of what these weapons are. So they are known as mercenary war machines. In the lawless expanses of the border princes, sophisticated weapons of war are in short supply, whilst the armies of more civilized lands make great use of devastating artillery designed by brilliant engineers and crafted by expert smiths and artisans. The ad hoc armies of many outlaw princes and robber barons of the region must rely on more archaic war machines. These mercenaries with access to primitive bombards and field guns are in great demand. And though they charge a premium for their services, there is no shortage of willing employers. Even the exiled nobles of Bretonnia have been known to employ mercenary gunners, preferring to use such ignoble weapons against their foes than have them fight for their enemies. Now, the reason that this is quite important is ranged weapons in Bretonnia are seen as a dishonorable thing. You will never find a Bretonnian lord or duke or baron carrying even a bow. The peasant archers are about the only thing that's allowed to, or peasants are the only thing that's allowed to fire ranged weapons. They're what crew the artillery pieces like the trebuchet and who fire the bows. But it is considered to be an unnoble way of war. You should stand toe to toe with your opponent, sword to sword, and see who's the better fighter. So the mercenary companies of the border princes do in fact make use of them, which is kind of interesting. It kind of goes to the how should I design my Bretonnian army? Like obviously I'm going with the axe symbol, which is one of the border princes in the red and black livery. And I'm going to have quite a large portion of my Bretonnian army be made up of this particular color scheme. And the story behind mine is he is indeed a border prince. He does have some honor and some nobility left. And he is wealthy enough. So what he does do whenever there's times of strife or war, he will hire other bands of knights to come and fight for him. Or he'll call on old oaths or old favors that he has accumulated to have these. So that's why there's a bunch of other units of knights in my army who have different heraldry and colors. It all blends in into one large force. So with that in mind, I did decide to go for the red and black scheme for my bombard for the 3 main crew. Now, obviously I want to differentiate the crew from the standard laborers. The crew of these things are definitely part of the army. They are well equipped, they are wearing armor, they're carrying swords. They're not just peasants. And to show that they do indeed carry and wear the color of their baron or duke. Whereas the laborers, I'm going to give them much more of a peasant feel, just like a dirty cotton shirt and brown pants kind of job to get them across. Now, I'm not going to show you a lot of painting them, base coating them at least. At the beginning of the video, I will do some layering on the laborers later on. You can see what they're actually turning out like. And as you can see at this point, I am just still getting in all of the base coats on 5 infantry models. I haven't even started on the actual bombard or the base itself, but usually I do these videos in a day, and I managed to get this one done in a day as well, but usually I just do 1 miniature. So the fact that this is technically 6, 5 crew and 1 war machine, plus quite a nice base, it was really a challenge for myself to get it all done. And I definitely didn't want to rush. I didn't feel like I rushed. I gave myself the time that I needed to get this done, because I do have quite a lot of reverence for it. I mean, it's a thing that I definitely wanted to have in my Bretonnian collection, but I didn't necessarily know how long it would be before it materialized in my collection. I did indeed look it up on eBay, and just the cannon without the crew was going for hundreds and hundreds of euros, which was kind of disheartening. I kind of didn't feel like it. A lot of people were talking about the idea, we'll just get one of the awesome 3D printed ones. They are much nicer miniatures, and I do agree there's some stellar 3D prints out there, and I have a million prints that I have access to. I could do that, but that goes slightly against the collector mentality. Now that I do own this one and it is built and painted, I can now 3D print another one if I want 2 of them in the army and feel the awesome big 3D printed one. But for me, the first port of call always has to be the actual original one. You know, something that I can look at in my collection and be like, I have this hard to get piece. It is now painted. And that just makes me happy. I don't know what it is. It's definitely one of the biggest charms that I'm feeling when I'm going through my old world collection and getting old miniatures put together and painted, is that it's these models that have been left on your backlog for 20 or 30 years that just deserve a paint job and deserve to be fielded on a table, and for some dice to be rolled in anger in relation to them. I can't wait to fire off my first shot with it, my Bretonnian Bombard. This thing's been waiting 35 years for it to be fired. I think it deserves it at this stage. And I'm definitely having that same feeling with a bunch of other things. Like I'm going through my box of Chaos stuff and pulling out all the stuff I have for Skaven. And all of a sudden I pull out a little baggie that's full of old metal storm vermin. And before Old World came back, I wouldn't in a million years have thought to have pulled them out and being like, okay, if I'm doing an Age of Sigmar Skaven army, I'm going to buy some new storm vermin miniatures and use those. But now with the Old World, now that I'm getting that nostalgic feeling, I'm dying to check and see how many of the old metal storm vermin do I have. Do I have enough to put a unit together? Get them built and painted and fielded. The unit's clearly never been built or painted, so it deserves it. A unit of old metal greatswords for the Empire. Now I have 40 painted plastic greatswords, but part of me wants to build a whole new unit of old metal greatswords and get that nostalgic feeling with them too. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you guys can chime in on this in the comments and let me know what you feel. I mean, like when they announced that they were going to be doing a made to order for orcs soon, and they're going to be bringing back the wyvern, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And the giant, I was like, awesome, metal giant and the metal wyvern. But they're bringing back like the second edition metal giant and old metal orc wyvern, and that made me really happy. I was like, oh, awesome, we get those really old models that are really hard to get, cost you a fortune on eBay, and I'll be able to add them into my collection, have them in display in my cabinets with my armies. There's something about that I'm really leaning into the prospect of. Maybe I'm weird, I don't know. So I've gotten all the base coats on the miniatures now, and I'm going with my traditional for Bretonnian black wash across the entire thing. I know it's quite dark, and because of all the metallics and stuff and dark browns, it does actually work as a pretty good shade. I know it's over the skin on this particular labourer. It's not the best thing, but during the layering process, I'll tidy him up as best I can. It's definitely an old hand-sculpted potato miniature. I don't know where he got his anatomy book from, but this labourer is got a bizarre body shape. Not to shame him, no shaming here. And then of course some black wash of course goes over the bombard itself, over the brass and silver and wood of this awesome little cannon. I also filled the barrel in with some black contrast paint, just to give the illusion of depth and darkness in there. Yeah, I think it did a pretty good job of it. It seemed to work. Now is the time where I grabbed some texture paste, some AK Interactive texture paste, and I applied that to all the miniatures, taking my time not to overshoot, because obviously these things have to sit into their awesome little scenic base. So if you accidentally let a blob of brown hang over and that dried and set and went hard, then he's not going to fit anymore. So you got to be nice and neat and tidy and make sure you do it properly. Same thing with the bombard, but also having to get under the bombard and not get it all over the wheels and stuff like that. Quite a simple little exercise. Just take your time and breathe when doing it. I have fallen completely in love with texture paste these last couple of years. I can't imagine doing hobby without them. How I PVA glued and sanded miniatures, I have no idea how I did that. And here's obviously the scenic base getting the same treatment. This did of course take a little minute to get done, because obviously I had to go around each and every one of those squares very, very carefully. I actually used a Q-tip to clean off the sides inside each square just to make sure I didn't get anywhere it shouldn't be. And then the cool little rock formations that I built up and super glued on, I blended them in with a little bit of the texture paste as well. You'll see in the next scene the left one has suddenly magically got more mud on it. I kind of forgot to do it before I did that little reveal there. And after that, it was then time to layer up. And obviously I've been doing the red and black scheme on a couple of different miniatures, so I'm quite comfortable with it now. All of my men-at-arms are going to be the same scheme, I believe. So there's going to be, I think, 60 odd men-at-arms, 3 blocks, all with red and black quartered shields. It's going to take forever. But I've done 10 of them already, and they look quite striking. So I am excited to see what the rest of them are going to look like on the table. Keep me getting neat and tidy. And it's that really funny thing is, like, because these models mean a lot to me now, and because I want to kind of show off and give them the paint job that they deserve, I am putting in a little bit more time. And it's funny how a 35-year-old model in a blister pack can look like an old potato model and look pretty awful. But once you start to take your time and apply some really nice paint to it, it suddenly starts to come to life, and it starts to, it doesn't look half bad. This model is pretty cool. I really like the design of that, or the shape of that, or the pose of that. And it all just kind of comes together to give you this really nice piece. I've noticed that more online as well. A lot of painters who are far superior to me are now going in at old models and giving them kind of modern day paint jobs. And some of the results they're getting, I forget who it was, but I'm following this guy painting up some new ogres. I don't know, ogres are still available in Sigmar. They're not exactly as old as some of the other models that I've been speaking of. But just getting ogre bulls painted to a really high standard, and it's just staggering what he's doing. Ogres being my first ever Warhammer army, and definitely one that I'm going to be fielding very soon. I'm excited about that prospect. I will be bringing you a Rhinox Rider video at some stage in the near future as well. So look out for that if you're excited for more old world content, and some also rare discontinued miniatures in that video as well. Continuing on the process of layering up all the black, taking my time not to hit any of the silver or brown or anything like that after I got the shield pretty much quartered the way I wanted to. Now I know the axe symbol that the transfer I'm going to put over that basically covers up all of the lines and where those lines meet. So even though I do go back and forth trying to make those lines on the shield as neat and tidy as possible and make the quarters as even as possible, even if you're not that neat, when you put the transfer over, it will cover up a multitude of sins and it won't even really matter. I had another plan for today's video, but I ended up going with this one instead because I'm still a little bit unsure of the steps I need to take for the other video. I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'll save it for a surprise because it will happen later in the week. When that video was kind of stressing me out a little bit, and then suddenly we pivoted at the last moment and I did this video instead. And I must say, from literally the beginning to the end, it was a joy to paint this old characterful piece. And I've obviously seen how it turns out at the end, and not to toot my own horn, but I'm quite proud of it. I think it's quite a nice piece to have in my collection. I am wondering if when they do the next wave of Bretonnian made-to-order miniatures, because there is definitely another wave of made-to-order miniatures coming for Bretonnians, I wonder, will they give us access to the Bombard? Will they put that old kit in a thing and let us buy it? Very, very curious of that. Here's the Labor, and like I said, I didn't allow them to have any of the Baron or Duke's colours. None of that red and black is on them. So I gave them the peasant's shirt and brown pants, like I said. They did get a little armoured helmet just to give them some slight bit of protection. And even this, the way that shirt was sculpted to be, it's too large for this guy. Clearly it's a hand-me-down or whatever. Or it's just cheaply made. The way it hangs off his body gives you so much texture and shape that the layering process was just so easy and gave me a really nice result. Okay, before I go on and do the last few bits of the painting side, I wanted to finish the basing. Well, at least the dry brushing of the basing. So for all the browns, I went over with a Riser Rust, really lightly, to give myself a nice bit of color into the ground. I didn't want it to be just that flat, cold looking brown. I like the ground and earth texture to have a little bit of life to it. People sometimes think I'm crazy for adding orange into it, but the result speaks for itself. I think the bases look ace when they're all done up, especially when I put the next highlight over the top of it, which is just a nice little bone dry brush over the top. That catches it, pulls it more to a natural tone, and finishes off the ground texture color really nicely. Now, obviously, we're going to be putting on tufts and static grass and stuff later on at the end of the process, and that's where the whole scene really does come to life. You'll notice when I'm doing the rock outcrops as well, obviously all the miniatures got sprayed black and then get sprayed grey sear just to give me a nice base coat to start my contrast from. I did the same thing on the base, so those rocks are just cork that got sprayed black and then get a dusting of grey sear. And then when I use the dry brushing on the base, I make sure to hit all that stone texture, and it finishes it off really nicely and helps blend it into the ground. I've been doing that quite a lot with a bunch of other bases, and I really like how it's turning out. Here's the bone, as you can see, going on as a nice light coat, especially over the designed scenic base thingy. I'd love to know your thoughts on these bases too. I've actually done one for my trebuchet as well, and I've recently 3D printed out them for my high elf bolt throwers. My 2 high elf bolt throwers have them. I think they're nice. I think they set set a nice little scene for artillery pieces. Something I'll definitely be doing for all my dwarf war machines and any other war machines that I need to have for my army. Obviously, you can still remove the crew to count wounds if you want to. I just think it's really cool, giving it the extra time and effort. I mean, back in the day, you would just have like for instance, an Empire cannon, and the cannon itself would just sit not on a base. It would just be on the table, and then there would be 3 crews standing around it, and it was always just a little bit. Like if anyone remembers the actual sprues you used to get with those cannons, there used to be all these extra bits and pieces. There was like a Hochland long rifle that was in a storage crate all folded up. It was awesome looking. Or just like piles of cannonballs and stuff. If you don't have a base, where the hell are you supposed to put all those? But if you have a cool scenic base like this, that's how you can definitely design the base to have all those different bits, you know, attached to it and arrayed correctly and looking nice. I mean, this is definitely inspired by the new Cities of Sigmar cannon. That thing just sets the precedence for how beautiful it is and how much of a scene and a feeling you get from when you look at it. Okay, time to add a little bit of face detail, highlighting up. Now there's one miniature in here. It might have been the guy that's shirtless. I don't know whether he got knocked on the face at some point in the casting or in the 35 years since then, but his nose is really flat, which was kind of annoying to paint, but I definitely don't think it was supposed to be. It looks like he was dropped at some stage or something. Here's me adding that axe transfer, and like I said, it goes across the entire kind of top and bottom and across left to right of the joining point between the black and the red. So once you get that on nice and neatly, you can't tell if the lines are a little bit off here or a little bit off there, which is really nice. Definitely going to help me when I'm doing another 50 men-at-arms bases. So this is pretty much the end of the painting side of the video. All the models are looking quite swish. Like I said, I really like how this guy turned out even by himself. Nice character for little models. I definitely think the red and black accented them really nicely. The guy aiming with his leather kind of jerkin, carrying a sword, ready to hit fire. The 2 laborers. The guy who's shirtless is probably the weakest model I've painted for the set. He's fine, but he's a bit of a potato model. Now, there's obviously far too much brown across the entire scene right now. So this is where we get to have a lot of fun. And like I said, we're going to add ground texture with tufts and a lot of static grass. So I'm going to go overboard with this. I like the idea of, think about it, Bretonnian knights are going to be fighting in mostly open fields where their horses can get into their lance formation and make their awesome charges and do stuff like that. So open fields are never really just flat and muddy, especially where the artillery is. These things were pushed into place and then hastily fired. It's not like a trodden path. So I'm going to add lots of nice grass tufts. These particular grass tufts on there are like 15 mil, they're really long ones. And then these are some of the shorter ones going in, just to continue adding that color. And I didn't want to stop there, so I did indeed get out some Geek Gaming Scenics quick drying glue. And I used this to apply some static grass to the rest of it. So all the models got a coat. Very simple. All you got to do is try and be as uneven as possible. A few splodges here and there. Grab some static glass. I always like to push the static grass down so it gets a really firm coat. And then I flick the base underneath to make the static grass stand up again. I do have a static glass applicator, but I couldn't be bothered hooking it up for such a small job. And then I'm obviously going to follow that through with the big scenic base itself. And exactly the same process. I'm adding some glue into some locations, trying to be as random as possible, which is hard to do. Your brain wants to do things in order and make sure you get a little bit of glue on every single one of the No. Try and just add a bit here and there without thinking and then know when to stop. And then obviously I'm pressing down like I said, and then turning it upside down and flicking it to make, like I said, the grass stand back up again. It does a perfectly good job. And with that done, it's time to put the cannon and all of its crew into place. They all have specific places, by the way, so it does actually tell a scene. The guy aiming is standing behind it. The guy lighting it is to the right. The guy pointing with the ramrod is to the left. And then the laborers are in the back left and back right of the scene. Just kind of watching on. And I was really pleased with this. I have a finished Bretonnian Bombard ready to be fielded. And then I took a bunch of pictures for you guys to show you what it would actually look like fielded on a table. I'm just really proud of it. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. I love, like I said, let me know what you think about old nostalgic miniatures. Let me know what you think about the designed bases that I made for these guys. And then let me know what you think of the overall effect. feel free to ask those in the comments below. That would really let me know if you want to see more of these videos, like the trebuchet one or the high elf bolt thrower one. I can do something similar. So I don't know unless you tell me. Well guys, there we have it. One Bretonnian Bombard painted up, ready to be put pride of place in my collection. It's kind of a surreal thing to own this miniature. I'm very, very grateful to the person that sent it to me. Like I said, I will cherish it. I hope he thinks I did a good enough job. It sat in his backlog for 35 years. 35 years. To put that into context a little bit, this was, like I said, the back of this box is 1988. That's the year I was born. So this miniature is older than I am. I'm born December 1988, the 22nd of December 1988. So there's a very, very good chance that the miniature I just built and painted is older than I am. And there's something very strange about that, but I loved every second of it. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's something a little bit different, and I just hope it was a cool journey. Learned something a little bit about the Bretonnian Bombard. And you think that I made this extremely old miniature look decent enough to put into an army and play in some games with the old world. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give the video a like. Any questions you want in the comments below, I will get back to absolutely everybody. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, there's links in the description below. Access to a private Discord server and an extra video every single week are just two of the awesome benefits. And make sure you're subscribed to not miss out on any future hobby goodness. Well, I think that's it for me for this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one.